Yes, I'm recording, I think.
Yeah, Kevin, recording started yet. If you want to go full screen with that presentation, recording's underway, you should be good.
Good. Okay, I was just checking, make sure it looked a bit, on my screen it looked funny. Okay, well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who I haven't actually met formally, my name's Kevin Fleming, and I'm looking after the Inlecom component of the ICP Inlecom's contribution to the EU-CIP project with my colleague, Colin Keogh. Our primary focus in this is contributing to task 4.2, which is commercialization and innovation support in the form of basically commercialization training. Now, some background for the EU-CIP project. The European Knowledge Hub and Policy Testbed for Critical Infrastructure Protection project. The aim is to develop a pan-European knowledge network. And the point is to enhance critical infrastructure and resilience in Europe. It's a coordination and support action, so research as such isn't so important, although there is still stuff on the background. But one of the primary thing is to draw upon a network called the European Cluster for Securing Critical Infrastructure, which has some 38 projects, ongoing and finished, all dealing with aspects of critical infrastructure protection. The whole point of our network is to develop evidence-based policies and also, particularly our area, improving the innovation capacity of critical infrastructure operators, authorities, and innovators. And we're covering research organizations, large and small companies, SMEs, and so forth. Just a quick show. This is the actual ECSCI network, which has some 38 projects, I believe. Every type of infrastructure you can think of, they're working on. The focus of a lot of the projects, focus on projects, cyber, physical, and hybrid threats. Some deal with natural hazards. There is, at least from what I've been seeing, a heavy weighting towards the cyber security, but it does cover all aspects of threats to critical infrastructure in Europe. ICP's role as the innovation support services within Task 4.2, business modeling, exploitation, and innovation support services. The whole point is this series of webinars, this is the third, and we're dealing with guidance in business modeling, marketing, promotion, identifying markets and areas of innovation, and the importance of IPR. How we're going is we've got our seminars as these webinars, so they're basically more general, not sector specific. Following this, we'll be making available, when the Knowledge Hub is up and running, we'll talk about that later, homework, if you like, for those interested, which is in the form of various templates and documents that you can complete with, for example, business plans, market assessments, and so forth. Once people have completed these documents, we'll be offering one-on-one mentoring sessions, more specialized. So that's when your specific sector, you can come and we can discuss that. Feedback is always more than welcome. I'll be sending a link to a feedback form after this. So this makes up the entire training cycle, if you like. We're doing 2 cycles. The next one will start again in about 6 months. So we'll be adapting the webinars and the templates and so forth. And we aim to finish around month 34, which is like July, year after next. As I said, this is the third. So the first lecture was on introduction. Sorry. Amelia wants to come back in. Introduction to commercialization. The second was on customer engagement and business models. And the third is on team and company structure, where we're looking at strategies, organizational, team dynamics, and collaboration, and also looking at other aspects. Now, we're very lucky to have, sorry, I'm trying to get it working. Here we are. Our colleagues today, Doctors Ronan Frizzell and Vassilios Albanis. Ronan is a innovation manager with ICP. He has a doctorate in composite materials. Formerly as head of Nokia Bell Labs, he has considerable industrial experience, which couples basically what he knows from his research research management, knowledge of technology, and sorry, just letting somebody else in, and also, you know, how to get all these innovations in a commercially relevant context in delivering it to marketplace. Vassilios is our intellectual property expert for doctorate in experimental physics. He has over 20 years experience in the market transfer commercialization, especially with University College London, working with SMEs and academic teams, evaluating technologies in terms of their technical and market variability. He's set up spin-out companies, business plans, technology roadmaps, and, you know, is very experienced in seeing innovative technologies being commercialized. So we're very lucky to have our colleagues here. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And I'll now stop sharing and hand it over to you.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Thanks for the introduction. So here is the set of slides, hopefully showing up on your screen. Yeah, so it's great to have the opportunity to talk about this topic today. I think it's a very interesting topic. Hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll also find it a very interesting topic. And the other thing to point out about it all really is that it's quite a broad topic. And so, like Kevin said there, we're trying to be general, but we're also trying to give the right message here as well, and a certain amount of detail as well, despite it being quite a broad topic. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to cover the area of go-to-market and what sort of business supports will be needed as you essentially take that journey. And what we're aiming for essentially is to provide you with some guidance, some awareness of essentially what's coming down the line should you want to take innovations from the lab or from the drawing board out into the market. So here is an overview of the webinars. Where we fit in then is right at the end or at the bottom of the list here, but you know, that's not so important. The key thing really is, like Kevin said, the aspects of what we've talked about before, what we're going to talk about today as well, they all link in together, and it's all there to create that awareness of what happens should you want to take that technology forward towards a commercial world where you can create some return on investment for your innovation. So if we go back to that point about how the go-to-market strategy is, it's quite broad. So in order for us to be able to, I guess, get a handle around this narrative, we're going to do a few little things through the presentation just to help with our narrative. The first thing is that we're going to think about the go-to-market strategy and business support from the point of view of what kind of team do we need to have in place in order to enable this, to enable you to get to the market. And what we're going to do is through the presentation, we're going to talk a bit more about how we're taking it from the perspective of the researcher. Essentially, you can imagine a researcher in the lab creating some sort of technology innovation based on their expertise, and they feel it's time now to move that to the market. So the reason for doing this really was just because we wanted a way to kind of tame the large subject of go-to-market. But I think the key message really is that a lot of what we talk about today is quite general, and it can be applied in different areas. So if you find yourself in a position where you're not a researcher, you're not in a lab, but you still have an innovation that you want to take to the market, then I think a lot of what we're saying today still applies. So what we're after is essentially trying to establish this mindset for the correct way to commercially exploit your innovations. And what we'll do is we'll look at three kind of key areas. One would be the team. We're going to also touch on the area of IPR, which is intellectual property rights. And we're also going to look at vision within the company as well. And we feel that these are three really interesting areas that we can tackle within this presentation. And if these are aligned correctly within a business, then we feel that you're in the right mode essentially to create that success for your exploitation activities. So the first step in all this really is just to make you aware of this journey. What does it take to bring your innovation, let's say, just to go back to our little narrative at the start there about how you may be in the lab, you may find yourself with this technology innovation. So what does it take to essentially bring that to the market? We won't talk a lot about technology in this presentation. We'll focus a little bit more on, let's say, the right-hand side of this screen, where we talk about the more commercially related or commercially focused activities. But we do start off with the technology. And if we look at the left-hand side here, we're at the point where we have the tech-ready point of view. And like Kevin said, I've got a technology research background, so I understand what it's like to be in this position quite well. And I'm sure a lot of you will be there as well, where you have this innovation, you feel like you've developed it far enough, and you really feel like it's time now to make some impact, let's say outside of the lab, again, just to tie in with our narrative, or essentially make some impact within the market. So the first thing coming down the line really is this transition that we have in the central part of this arrow, which is around that transition from, let's say, the prototype you have in the lab out to what we're calling enterprise grade, or an enterprise grade solution. And that clearly means that what you're doing is you're converting your prototype into something that's more market ready, more, let's say, customer friendly. And the point here really is that sometimes this goes very, very smoothly, but often it doesn't. Sometimes it involves integration essentially with wider systems, or integration with existing products, let's say, already that might be available within your company. And that integration can sometimes throw up challenges that are around perhaps redesign, or they might even force you to make compromises on the technology that you started out with. And it's important here just to be prepared for those unforeseens, to make sure that you are aware of them as soon as possible, because they can be very costly. They can be very time consuming in order to try and tackle those sort of challenges. And I think this is one of the links then back to the earlier webinars as well, where we've heard about the importance of engaging with your customers early, trying to find out what's awaiting you essentially within the market. And the sooner you're aware of those challenges that can come up in the central part of the arrow, then the better off you're going to be. Like I said, we're going to focus more on the right-hand side of the arrow here. And what this is essentially an overview of the kind of support functions that you would need to develop once you start to move towards that more commercial focus of your work. So this is related to marketing, sales, partnerships, licenses, all these kind of things that essentially are commercially focused, very little to do with your technology. And although we're kind of showing a very, very high level overview of this journey, I think the overall message with the slide is that you can see there's a shift as you move towards the market, obviously, between the technology focus where you started, and there's a transition as you move closer to the market, at where let's say the technology development stages become less and less important to what you're doing day to day, and it becomes much more important to start to think about, well, what are those other roles? What are the other things I need to do in order to make sure that I can get a return on investment? And I think the key takeaway here is that, you know, we're all very much focused in on our innovations. That might be a technology. And what we're saying here is that technology alone won't create that market impact. And it's our premise today that what we really need is the right team to enable that market impact, to enable you to go to the market and be successful once you get there in your commercialization exploitation. So again, if we just touch on the idea that this is a very, very broad area, what we wanted to do today is sort of, again, narrow down the narrative itself, just to give us the ability to tell this story without kind of keeping you here all day. So what we've done is we focused on two different routes to market, or two different types of businesses. So what we're looking at here is a new business, which can be like a startup or maybe a spin out from a university, for example. And we're also going to look at in-company commercialization. So this is where perhaps you find yourself within an enterprise, an established organization, and you need to transition some new innovation from the lab into the existing business line, for example. I think you can appreciate that, you know, these are two very focused areas, and that in between each of these different types of businesses, there's many other options that you can think about, many other challenges that would exist within these different types of businesses. And so the way we look at it is that there's essentially a spectrum there for the different types of businesses, and because of that spectrum, we want to be able to just pick out two kind of key areas and focus on them for today. So despite the challenges, the different types of challenges that you can have within these different types of businesses, we also see that when we look at them, there's also quite a lot of commonalities between the types of activities that these businesses need to undertake in order to essentially get to the market. And what we see here is a list of very, again, high level overviews of what needs to be done, but some very, very important steps here. So the first one, of course, is related to the team and how that team needs to have the complementary skills in order to enable that impact within the market. The other area, of course, is around development of roadmaps and business plans. Again, that ties back, I think, to previous conversations that our colleagues had around business model canvas development. And also as well on the bottom of this list here, we have the idea of testing your assumptions, getting out and dealing with your customers as early as possible, trying to understand how do you make contact with your clients, how do you get early traction within the market? And that was all covered, I think, in a previous webinar within this series, and some very, very important messages there. And again, when we look at the overview of commonalities among these types of routes to market, or in terms of the types of activities that will happen within these different businesses, we also see that they have common goals. And if you really generalize this and whittle it down, in all these situations, whether you find yourself in that brand new business, that brand new startup, or whether you're in an established company, what you're moving towards when you have your innovation is this point where you want to be able to convince others to be able to invest in your idea, that your idea is strong enough, it's worth the investment, and that they will get a return on that investment. And so we'll touch on that point or later on in the discussion around what do you really need to do to be able to put forward a compelling argument for people to invest. So that gives you an idea then about some of the I guess the tricks that we're using in order to try and narrow down this discussion. But certainly from there we can start to take a bit more of a deeper dive on some of the steps essentially that we see as being important as you move towards the market. What we've outlined here are certain stages that you will have to follow in order to reach this endpoint of essentially a sustainable business. And by sustainable here, we mean that the business is or has the ability to turn a profit. Essentially, the income is higher than the expenditure. The thing that we've done here, of course, is that we've put this all in a linear way. We've put them one beside each other, and we're following the arrow that you see in the background. Of course, that's not necessarily the case. We could imagine a situation where these steps or stages might happen in parallel. They may even be mixed up, but typically, if you're going on this journey from your early stage concept out to the point of sustainable growth, you will move through these different types of stages, and ultimately what you're trying to do is get to this exit position. That exit position will mean different things for the different types of companies on the spectrum that I mentioned earlier on. So if you're a startup, your exit position might be the sale of that company in order to make money on your investment, essentially. If you're within that existing business, the exit may be more related to a transition of a new technology or an innovation to your business line. So no matter what your target is, you often will have to move through these various different stages that we've outlined here. For the purpose of the talk again today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on these three areas here. So the vision and team, a little bit on the finance and investment, and a bit more on the sustainable growth parts of the line here of stages that we will take. But what you're going to see is that all the way through, what we're going to talk about is the importance of people and the skills that those people have, and the importance also of having a very clearly defined company vision that helps you and your company move towards this exit position that we see on the slide here. So what we've outlined here essentially are the other jobs to be done. So here what we're talking about is the other jobs other than technology development. So we're going to have to leave technology development, we're going to have to leave innovation development to the experts, to the people who've had the ideas, and we fully trust and believe that people will be able to push the technology in the right direction and bring it to the market. The key thing for us here today is to start to make you a little bit more aware of, well, what else needs to happen on this journey, and how do we go about actually securing our first customers? What do we need to have in place in terms of skills in order to start to scale that endeavor that we're going on? And you can see here that, again, we've listed some interesting jobs that are related to the sales development, engagement with your customers, financing, contracts. And what you'll notice about all of these is that they have very little to do with the actual technology. And yet what we're saying here really is that all of these roles are absolutely critical in getting you to a point where you can actually sell that technology or sell that innovation that you're developing and essentially create that return on investment. So I think the key message here really is that it's important to be aware that these sort of roles do need to be filled, and the question then becomes, well, when do I need to fill them, and what exactly do they need to do? And of course, if we think back to, let's say, our spectrum of different types of companies, when you will introduce these roles, what type of activity will they necessarily undergo, will all depend on the company itself. It's going to be very, very specific to the company itself. And it's one of the reasons why, for example, the one-to-one sessions that Kevin mentioned are so important for starting to really get into the details of what does this all mean for me, for my innovation, for my level of development. And that's the reason why they are being introduced within the project as well. So here, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a step back. Essentially, we're going to go back to a little bit more of a higher level. And what I wanted to do here was provide some observations about the different types of companies that we've touched on today, and to try and maybe highlight some of the challenges that they have as they go through this journey towards the market, as they start to think about their go-to-market strategy. So if we start with the academic spinouts, typically what we find is that these are often run by scientists. Again, let's go back to our narrative around the technology that's been developed within the lab, and it's being pushed out towards the market. And of course, these people will have huge amounts of expertise in their technology domain, but may lack a certain amount of knowledge around how to commercialize. What's the right way to commercialize? What's the right roles to bring in at the right time? And that can raise barriers for, releasing the value of the innovations that they're pushing towards. And it's one of the reasons why you do see a lot of supports around commercialization within the academic world. If we look then at SMEs, so they're small to medium enterprises, these companies typically have already engaged in the market. They have an understanding of the market. They've delivered something to their customers. And when a new market opportunity arises, typically there's an issue there with time and resources that really prevents them from being able to diverge away from their main business lines. If we compare that then to the corporate world, where there's a seemingly abundance of resources available and a lot of supports often towards fostering innovation within companies, it can still be very, very difficult to commercialize and get products to market because of things like internal politics, because of, let's say, established positions within the senior management chain about what should and shouldn't be done. We also see that there can be very established or well-established product or service roadmaps already outlined. Those roadmaps typically have a horizon of around about 3 to 5 years. And because they've already been invested in, they've been thought about, they've been championed, it's often very, very difficult to maneuver away from those established roadmaps, creating challenges then for people trying to roll out innovations within the corporate world. And I think, the goal here really was to highlight some of the challenges that can exist within these different types of companies. And I think for the purposes of this presentation, all we can do really is assume that at some stage, if you're going down this route and you find yourself in these different companies, you will get the green light from some key stakeholders to go ahead and start to commercialize your innovations. That could be something along the lines of investment from a VC if you're within a spin out to tell you to go ahead and start to commercialize. It could be, you know, the green light from your senior management within the corporate world in order to go ahead and start to commercialize. And so the question for us today really is, what does this all mean for the team in terms of getting to the market, and how do you make that all as effective as possible? So in order to talk about that in a little bit more detail, I'm going to hand over to Vassilios, who's going to take us through the next few slides. So Vassilios.
Thanks, Ronan. Thanks for setting the scene here. And let's just I'm going to stay a couple of seconds on this particular slide before we move it onto the team. And just to reinforce what Ronan was saying, you may find yourself in either of these locations, if you like, in the innovation ecosystem. You may already be a researcher within an established corporate entity, or you're a researcher at a university, or anywhere in between, an SME and so on. And what we're trying to say here is that there are commonalities across the board, whichever way you find yourselves. So you may find yourselves actually leading a team, putting a team together, or being part of a team. And within that context, if we move on to the next slide, Ronan, thank you. Within that content, and keeping the theme of the spectrum, when we're trying to emphasize here that there is no one size fits all solution. It's not black and white, and you cannot break it down into sort of a nicely linear components. It's a spectrum, and you may be somewhere along that spectrum in your career now, or have been, or looking to be. So with that in mind, the key in getting a technology off the ground, off the lab, and into the market, or one of the key drivers, is the team. You cannot have a technology commercialization. You cannot have exploitation of technology, of any technology arising from within an SME, from a company, from a university, or indeed from an EU-funded project, without having the right team in place. I mean, I've seen this happening both ways, either the technology being too early, but the team being very well trained in actually looking at how to manage things and how to move things, and getting it through the various stages, being able to pivot, being able to change direction, reassess aims, and so on, and vision. And we'll talk about vision a bit later down the line. So in terms of the team, keeping in mind, again, the spectrum, there's two ends, or two sort of main areas we're going to be constraints that we're going to be operating within. One is you have a startup and a spin out, and on the other hand, you're in a corporate environment, sort of an established business. On the former, you're going to have typically a few people joining or starting, or being the founders or the founding members of that startup / spin out team. On the established, on corporate side, you may be one of many. You may be a team of researchers and managers and so on within a corporate organization, and you're asked to support the technology or take a new technology to the market. Excuse me. So there is a difference in terms of what skills are readily available to you, what support mechanisms you can access, and also what kind of team roles you can put together, you can sort of bring together in order to have a successful and effective team. Again, let's look at the spin-out startup. Very exciting, new technology, founding team, very passionate about their idea. And then the roles there tend to mix, and there's a very sort of there's a large gray area of roles. You can be a CEO or a CTO, and at the same time, you may be looking at the finance, you may be looking at sort of marketing and sales and so on. So what happens at that stage is that you get people doing pretty much a little bit of everything. The roles are broadly defined. There is usually a CTO or a CEO or a CEO, I should say. There is an advisory. Ideally, there should be an advisory board in the background. There are some people who are more, at least perhaps not initially, but soon after the setting up, people who are a bit more able to manage the sales and marketing team. But in most cases, all these people may be the same person. You may be a CEO, and maybe doing 2 or 3 roles at the same time. Now, let's put a pause here on the spin out side. So if you look at on the corporate side, that's where you start seeing much more specialized roles, or more people with specialized roles being brought into the mix and being brought, their roles are being transferred into into a team, and the focus is to develop what the company has existing in its portfolio. There may be, the roles are clearly specialized and very clearly cut out. They may tend to overlap between the various business and technological units and technology units. And in this case, you're not looking to find people, you're not looking to hire people, you're looking to actually collect the right people from the various teams, get the buy-in from the senior management and say, I'd like to use XYZ in my team to take a new technology out. I've got a great idea. I need the people to put it together. And you're looking for sort of broad support, or looking at taking advantage of the mechanisms that give you broad support across the whole sort of a function of a team. Now, move to the next slide, please. Okay, so again, keeping the same thing, we're still looking at the team, still looking at the spectrum, and we're looking at, and now we're thinking, all right, I've got 3 or 4 people who are interested in joining my team, or I may be that person who is interested in joining someone's team, spinning out a company, or they're part of a sort of technology or business unit. So what is the focus when you start building a team, when you start putting people together? At the spin out on end of the scale, again, things can be a little bit fuzzy. You tend to get people who may work together, may have come up with the idea together, or are sort of colleagues and so on. And the aim there is to actually build a team, put the team together, bring the team together, and make a sort of a cohesive team. Typically, at that stage, you have to create the company from the ground up. You have to go through all the legal and financial requirements and settings and so on to set up a company and get it off the ground. This may be within, if you are working within a university, then there are support mechanisms, typically a tech transfer office, that will enable that spin out to take place. Many other cases, again, from experience, academics and or other entrepreneurs tend to do this by themselves. There's no right answer here. It depends on the circumstances and depends on where you are positioned, both in terms of career and in terms of sort of a company. Speaking again from experience, the founders may not necessarily be able to operate at a commercial level. And I think Ronan mentioned this earlier, that you may be a researcher who's very good at your underpinning science and technology and engineering, but you may not have had any exposure to a commercial environment. So you cannot have a team based on that type of individual or individuals. You need to have a broad team with very complementary sets of skills or skill sets. And you have to be flexible enough. You have to be able to respond to the circumstances and adjust to whatever external pressures arise. And in most cases, you learn on the job. I think most of us have done something similar. You start with a new project, something exciting. You may not know too much about it. And part of the process and the fun is that you actually learn on the job. So, if you're an academic scientist who hasn't sort of had exposure to commercial aspects, then you get to do that. If you're on the other end of the scale and you have very much a commercial experience, business management experience, then you get to learn about new technologies and ideas and scientific methods. So it's the right mix and complementary skills coming together. Now, if we look at the other side, where, like I mentioned earlier, the skills are fairly specialized and existing, the support mechanisms exist, and it's a very sort of a stratified layer of operational layer, then you need to, when you're building a team, you're effectively building, or putting a team together, you're effectively building momentum around that idea. You want to get everyone excited in that corporate structure. You're going to get them excited about your idea. You're going to get them excited about the new possibility or the possibility of a new product. and a new technology and so on. So what you typically do is you go and find champions for that idea who can advocate your idea, push and move the idea within the various layers in your corporate management chain. So at that stage, or through that process, you're sort of selecting people. You may be given the option to select people. You may be given the option to allocate people yourself, or you may be able to that relevant people, colleagues with particular skills, come over to your side and work with you, allocate some time and resources. And that goes back to investment, and we're going to touch upon that a little bit further down the line. However, I think the understanding is, if you look at ends of the scale, this one, the sort of the established, well-stratified operational structure, tends to be more constrained. You may have to work through compartmentalized departments and units. You may actually you may find yourself in a position where you can identify people with well-defined skills, but with lack of flexibility in terms of moving from one unit to another, or from one idea to another. As Ronan mentioned earlier, in the corporate environment, things are a bit more established, more vested interests in terms of product development and business functions and technology functions and so on. So the key takeaway from this slide is you have to really be prepared to work on either side of that spectrum. You find if you are on the build the team phase, then your job, if you are the one who's building the team or involved in building the team, is to take a broad look and say, I need XY skills in my team, and then try and get the right people, try and get people to come and work with you, or try and get the right people sort of to mix their skills towards something that amplifies and sort of becomes bigger than the sum of its parts. Now, on the other side, your job is to work through corporate effectively strata and identify the right specialized skills and build typically a business proposal or a business case around this, because at that stage, your corporate company will have to allocate resources or divert resources to do that. And if you go the next slide, please, Ronan. All right. So, having said all that, just sort of a summary or some key points that we'd like you to take away from this particular discussion about skills and the team. You have an effective team, or you have a team that operates effectively. You need a few sort of things, and these apply both in the case of a spin out or a startup, where things are very fuzzy, very open-ended, keep changing, and on the other end of the scale, where things are much more compartmentalized, stricter, and much more sort of well positioned. You need a clear and common vision, and we'll talk about a vision in a few slides down the line. So let's leave that aside for the time being. As I was saying earlier, a team is all about the right mix of skills and the right attitudes. And typically, from our experience, and I'm sure that reflects your experience as well, it's all about getting people together who have some knowledge that is relevant to the area of your spin out, your startup, or the area of the corporate business technology that you're trying to, or new product you're developing. And there is also the need for the capacity and the capability to take on key tasks and activities. And that means everyone effectively puts their, rolls their sleeves up and agrees to work hard. And because of that, or for that, you have to have the commitment to put the necessary time and effort to do things, and importantly, learn new things, identify the areas in that spin out and in that business that you're not fully up to speed with, and go and ask the people who are more aware, more knowledgeable about it, your colleagues, your friends. And obviously, to do all this, you need to have a passion about that particular concept or that particular technology or the market you're trying to access. Typically, when you start a new set up a new business, you either come from a position that I have a great idea, or I have a technology, or I have a passion for that particular area. So you may be in a position that you find yourselves in either of these three sort of buckets, so to speak, or there's a mix. And what I'd like to stress here is, ideally, the last point, ideally, you need to have some experience in in the area that you're engaging in. And have learned some lessons that can be brought into the team. In both cases, but especially in the case of a spin-out, that usually means engaging with an advisor, a mentor, or an expert from the industry who may have done this before, may have worked on that area before, has all the the experience and the expertise, and can help guide the ideas, guide activities, and focus on the areas that really will make a difference. Otherwise, you end up sort of going through a very scattergun approach and trying to hit everything in front of you. So the message here is, everyone on your team, just like myself, just like Ronan, Colin, Kevin, and everyone else, and in your teams as well, have different strengths, skills, and obviously weaknesses. So you need to focus and work on these, amplify your strengths and your skills of the team, and enable everyone to operate at that level where they feel they add to the mix, and they can see tangible results out of this. So I think you can move on to the next slide. And I think, Ronan, you want to talk about the company vision a bit.
Yeah, thanks very much, Vassilios. This is, again, another interesting topic. When we were going through the ideas around what could we present during this call, this came out as being, one of the ones that we definitely have to touch on. I'll get into the reasons why in a second, but let's try and be a little bit kind of more clear about what it is we're talking about. So in terms of the company vision, what is this? It's essentially a high-level message around clarifying what the company or the team, depending, of course, on where you find yourself, wants to achieve. And I think the most important part about it is why you want to achieve that. It should be expressed in a clear and concise way. I think preferably it should be written down somewhere so that people can actually go and study the words and really get an understanding for what it is that the company is after with its vision. Ultimately, what it should be doing is defining your long-term objectives, the direction that you expect the company or the team to go in order to reach those objectives as well. And the reason why we think this is quite important is because it actually has quite a practical effect within the business as well. And the reasons for this essentially is that by having a clearly defined vision, what it does is it helps people to actually understand where and how they fit into an overall organization. That can be very motivational because it means that people can understand, well, if I do this role, I understand how it provides value to the company because I can see how it impacts essentially the vision, the direction that the company is going in. And like I said, this can be quite motivational. It's important as well for team members to understand essentially what expectations exist within the company for them within their role. So it helps again to clarify what's expected of me as a team member. For example, how do I contribute to the vision? And if I'm contributing to that vision, then I know that I'm meeting a certain level of expectations within the organization. Again, it's a motivational aspect. It helps people to stay engaged within the team as well. I think this one is probably the most important. It's around how a clear vision can essentially empower people to make decisions within their daily roles as well. And I think that's very important because it means that people can decide essentially for themselves what's the best way to go. If I make a decision to do one thing versus another, if I prioritize one set of activities over another, I can do so with the vision in mind. I can do so knowing that the thing that I choose to do today is important because it's going to address the company vision better than another direction that I could take. And you can be confident then that the efforts that you're putting into your work are actually going in the right direction. So I think that one again is very, very important for team morale, for team team motivation. I think also from an overall organization point of view, it's very, very important to have this company vision as well, because what it can do is it can actually help people to decide, okay, if there's a new market opportunity, if there's a new direction that we think we should go in, how do we reason that? How do we actually create the argument to say, yeah, we should go in this direction? The company vision can actually really help in this, in terms of being able to define, well, if we go in that direction, this is how it addresses the company vision. This is how we address the overall goals of the company itself. And of course, that sort of change is very positive. It encourages positive change within the organization, which means then that the organization stays dynamic, it stays reactive to the market and so on, but stays essentially core to what it is that it's set out to do in the first place as well. So I think vision, for these reasons, is all very, very important. I think not only for the organization, but particularly for the team members within the organization, in terms of, you know, where they see themselves fit. And I think having a very clear company vision, what it does is it actually supports what's called a growth mindset within a team. And, you know, if you have time, I would definitely recommend going off looking up topics around growth mindset within teams, because it's all there related to motivation within teams. I think the vision can really help people understand where they fit in, how they can contribute to the organization. And I think you can get a sense of what a growth mindset is all about just by looking at the various different points that I've gone through there. Yeah, so it's my turn to have a look at the spectrum, and if we kind of look at this with the lens of the company vision, this is what it looks like. So essentially, if we go over to the left-hand side where we have our startups and spinouts, what we find is that the vision is often quite changeable in these types of organizations. And this is often because, you know, like we talked about before, the research is coming, let's say, from the lab, or the innovation is coming from people who have very clear ideas about, well, this is how it's going to impact the market. This is why it's important for the market. And the challenge here is that the information that they have is often very new. They haven't really engaged with the market. And so it's very important for these people to think about and respond to what's happening in the wider, especially the ecosystem around investment. So this is where the VCs are investing their money. It's very important for a company to understand what it is that the VCs are doing, what they need to do. And that helps to essentially to shape and change the overall vision that's coming from the company. And it's because the company itself then has this conflict between the technology it wants to push into the market and the pull that exists within the market for particular solutions. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing, because that push and pull that you get within the market actually helps to evolve the vision, hopefully ending up in a position where it's both beneficial for the market and for the company themselves. When we move over to the other side of the spectrum, so we're on the established business side of things, the vision can often be fairly well crystallized. It's often based on well established and well understood business targets and market drivers. The idea here, though, as well, is that even in those situations, the companies need to be aware that their vision needs to be able to change in reaction to customers and in reaction to shareholder needs, world events, for example. And in that way, you know, we can still see changing within the vision, reaction within the vision, so that the company itself stays market focused. I think we can all think of examples of where companies haven't reacted to market changes and, you know, have suffered adversely as a result. So yeah, let's just go back to the arrow slide that we've had earlier on in the presentation. And what I want to do now is just focus a little bit on the finance and investment side of things. And again, you know, the whole presentation is about making you aware of certain aspects, making you aware of what's coming down the line. And certainly as you reach this end of the well, our linear scale here that we've shown on the screen, you're going to end up in this situation where you're looking for investment. And I think the key message here really is that no matter where you find yourself within the spectrum of different types of companies that we've talked about earlier on, you're always going to be looking for investment. That could be from a VC if you're in the startup, or it could be, for example, from senior management if you're within that established business. And what we've done here is we've just put up some kind of pointers, some ideas about where you should be looking for answers. Should you be going for this investment conversation with your key stakeholders? So the questions to answer really are around, well, who's involved? Okay, so again, just to go back to our theme of, well, who's on the team, and also not just who, but why are they there? What are they going to do? What value are they going to provide to your organization? And what's your differentiation? So that's your USP, your unique selling point. How does that then impact the market? How much of the market potential does it unlock to have that particular differentiation? Basically, how do you stand above the competition? And then when we think about, well, how are you actually going to go to the market? We have to think about this overall go-to-market strategy. And what's particularly important, I think, is the initial go-to-market strategy around, well, how does your differentiation address the needs of your key target customer groups, your initial target customer groups? What kind of proportion of the market is that going to really address? How is your team going to go about actually securing sales within that particular aspect of the market? And I think the most important thing here really is the point at the very bottom, is all about the ask. And this is an area where people start to shy away a little bit from, what are you really looking for? And I think the advice here really is that if you're thinking about your investment conversations and you want people to make that investment decision, you need to be very, very clear about what you're looking for. Not only in terms of, let's say, the level of resources that you're looking for, or the type of support that you're looking for, but also very important to highlight, how are you actually going to go about using that? So there's no point in having just a plan without having the actions associated with that plan. And so I think, overall, if you take all the various different boxes that we've highlighted here, I think you can see that, having this investment discussion very much relies on a lot of what we've talked about earlier on in this talk around the go-to-market strategy, the team, and also it links into some of the earlier presentations as well around knowing your market, knowing your customers. And so this is essentially your endpoint. This is what you're looking for in order to unlock that investment, and certainly a place to start to get the wheels turning, I guess, in the brain around what answers do I need to have when I go into these sort of discussions. So here we find ourselves, I guess, at the end of the stages that we've highlighted earlier on. And one of the things we're going to talk about now is this point around sustainable growth. And I think this is a huge subject area. Again, it probably could have a webinar all to itself. But what we're going to do today, just for helping, I guess, with our narrative, is to focus in on something that we think is very, very important. And this is around intellectual property, and how this resource is going to be, very, very important for helping you to navigate this this growth part of the stages that we have outlined here. So again, Vassilios is going to jump in and give us an overview of this particular topic.
Okay, thanks, Ronan. And again, just to reinforce what Ronan was just saying, there are quite a few subjects we can touch upon when it comes to sort of a sustainable growth. But however, one that we feel is very important, and especially in projects such as EU-CIP and other EU-funded projects, is that of intellectual property rights. Now, we could spend a whole workshop, we can spend a whole day talking about IP rights, and I'm more than happy to say that I can bore you to death about it, but we're trying to focus down to some key elements that align with the discussion about the team, the vision, and the ultimate need to arrive at a position where your company, your idea, your business unit gains and acquires that investment, that resources, or the resources to put that idea forward, to move that idea forward. So coming back to the theme of our spectrum, there are different ways that, and I'm also going to skip discussing, talking about what is intellectual property. Let's assume that we're sort of more or less are all aware of intellectual property, but ultimately intellectual property rights are effectively the rights that you have over certain areas of your creations, be that your trademarks and your copyright and the ideas that you write down, you put in a presentation, or the trademarks that your company owns, or the patents, a bit more sort of hard intellectual property, the patents that yourselves as inventors, entrepreneurs, researchers, within a startup or within a corporate organization have. So IP is an asset, just like any other company assets, tangible assets. This is an intangible asset and can be leveraged to achieve various various goals and outcomes. In our case, again, we're looking at IP and intellectual property rights as a mechanism, as a tool, as an asset that amplifies what the team, the strategy, the vision is, and aligns it and moves it towards an investable position. So, and intellectual property, again, like with everything else we talked about, it isn't a black or white subject. It's very broad, and it needs to be looked at from many different angles. In our case, for today's webinar, we're going to look at it from the position, from the place of a startup or a spin-out, and again, an established business, a corporate organization. So the former, or for the former, IP is of extreme value. It is something that every new spin-out or startup gets measured against. You can have an idea, you can have a new technology, it may be revolutionary, but if it's not protected or protectable, meaning if you cannot use it without someone else coming in and taking it from you, then the value of that particular asset is very little. So when you are at the stage of a spin-out at an academic organization or you're as an entrepreneur, what you have, the main goal is to secure intellectual property and create a portfolio of intellectual property assets. You may start with one asset, a patent, may you end up with owning or creating 2 or 3 other assets, other patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, and so on. And that is a little bit challenging in itself, because you have, at that stage, your ideas are constantly evolving. They are driven typically by technological or scientific drivers. And in many cases, there is a lack around clarity or clarity around intellectual property. What is that is innovative? What can be protected? Is it useful? Is it commercially relevant? Can you deploy this in a market or in a commercial setting? And in other cases, there may be a bit of a lack around understanding of intellectual property. You may think, or one may think, that IP is all about filing a patent application, which is not. This is just part of the process. So you may, or the team may, lose sight of what's important when it comes to intellectual property, and that is a strategy. Just like your go-to market strategy, you have to have a strategy that looks at how you can create intellectual property, how you can create a portfolio of such assets, and how you can leverage them for commercial benefits. Typically, ideally, you have to have the strategy before you start thinking about IP. If you have to put strategy after you think you came up with an idea, that may be a little bit too late, and you'll have to sort of backtrack on a few things. So the strategy is all about protection. You need to be able to say, I have an innovative idea, it is novel, I can patent it, I can protect it, and therefore you have to be able to put a protection wrapper around that idea. And there are different ways of doing that. And I think there are opportunities for us to discuss intellectual property on a different setting. Typically, at a spin-out stage or a startup, you may lack the funds to support IP protection. Protecting IP, filing a patent is expensive or can be expensive, or wrong decisions can lead to very expensive bills. So it's all about, like we said, it's all about reaching at the point where you're going to be asking for investment, and part of that investment will be towards securing your IP or protecting your idea or developing your idea further to secure that IP. Now, if you switch over to the other end of that spectrum and we look at a corporate organization, which is well stratified with a business units, sort of compartmentalizing and so on, you may start with an existing IP portfolio. In fact, I would expect that any corporate organization will have a well-established IP portfolio. There will be mechanisms to identify, review, protect, and leverage intellectual property. So if you're gonna have, or there is gonna be support and an existing framework in the background. The aim there is to protect, to create intellectual property and rights and associated rights, and then use them to build something, build a service, build a product, enter into a new market. To do that, however, the focus, because you already have existing intellectual property, is not how to develop it, but whether you can use it beyond your company's operational targets. And that is effectively what's called the freedom to operate. Can you take your intellectual property and build it into a product without infringing or without stepping into someone else's IP territory, which is a major issue in intellectual property. So it's all about differentiating your IP. You may have a lot of existing IP, but then you have to choose the way that you can differentiate your IP over existing IP portfolios and existing patents and trademarks and so on. And it's all about defending that. So you should be able to protect it and position it in such a way that someone else cannot come back to you and say you're either using IP that we generated or someone trying to take that IP away from you. And again, ultimately, large corporate business is all about money, and monetizing intellectual property is part of that function. And you're looking to do that, or IP can enable you to go into new areas and expand it in new markets, find new customers, build new products, launch new technologies and products, and so on. So go to the next slide now, Ronan. So what we thought may be also interesting, slightly diverting, but still sort of still within the scope of our discussion, to talk about a bit about the value of intellectual property as an asset, as a business asset. Again, we can spend a lot of time talking about this, which I'm sure you're all going to be happy to hear that we're not. But what we'll do is we're trying to sort of point out certain areas and certain points that you should at least be aware, and these are sort of a key takeaway points, that the value of IP is demonstrably well established, and it is and has been and will be used as a key business asset across the board, from a small startup or spin out all the way to a corporate entity and anyone and anything in between. It gives you a number of advantages. Having intellectual property, being able to claim that you have an idea, that it's yours, you developed it, it's different from someone else's, and it's exclusively under your control, meaning you can use it yourselves, building something, putting it into a new product, a new service, or selling it, licensing to someone else. It's a major asset. It gives you competitive advantage. You can claim that you have sort of innovations that are beyond what other people have done, and they are protected and they are ready to be used and leveraged into different scenarios. It gives financial benefits and financial value. Like I said, you may license it, you may sell it to someone else. You may use that, in the case of a spin-out, a startup, you may use it to attract investment. Venture capitalists, VCs, typically look for spin-outs startups that have intellectual property that is ready to be used, ready to be deployed. It shows that having that IP at that stage works at many different levels. Key amongst those are two. One, it shows confidence in your idea, that you've protected it because you believe in it, because you know you can use it. And secondly, because it's valuable in a particular market or industry sector. It also works from a marketing, sort of from a soft power sort of way, where you can, as a company, as a spin out, as a startup, as a corporate organization, can say we have a large portfolio of IP, meaning we've worked hard, we're innovative, we are specialists, and we're leaders in what we're doing. And finally, last but not least, there are certain staff benefits for when it comes to intellectual property. Having IP or securing IP and successfully commercializing it, licensing or divesting it, inventors get typically a share of that value. So if you are an early stage academic or any stage academic or an employee in a company, you will get a benefit out of generating intellectual property. And there are mechanisms that your company, your employer will have put in place to ensure that there is a fair remuneration when it comes to intellectual property. So all in all, the value of IP is great. It's huge. It is well established when it comes to startups and spin-outs, especially for them, and also corporate organizations. Now, if we move to the next slide, I'll try and give you an example of that. This is from the European Patent Office. It's a recent publication. I've just realized I failed to put the link in there. We can share that. That discusses IP uptake and use in case of startups. Now, focusing on startups because that's where the EPO and ourselves actually, so we'll find a lot of interest. If you look at the graph, I'll very briefly explain. It looks like a very sort of a strange looking graph, but I'll briefly explain what's happening. So when a startup, let me rephrase, a startup goes through a set of stages when it comes to its both financial and investment evolution. So you typically start with a pre-seed, or you start with even sort of earlier money than that, maybe friends and family, maybe sort of angel investors, but typically all that sort of captured under the term of seed. So you start with seed investment, then you move on to your early stage, maybe Series A, Series B. Again, those letters denote the level of investment and typically the stage in a company's development. And you reach the late stage where your company is effectively hit that point of sustainable growth, and you start thinking about exit. What are we going to do next? Are we going to sell the company? Are we going to stay with the company, expand it, enlarge it, and so on? It's the left-hand side. And you can see that, at least from a European perspective, you see it sort of almost like an evolutionary process taking place. There are a lot of seed rounds, meaning there are a lot of startups who are trying to raise money at that stage and take their idea, their concept, their technology to the next level of its development. And as you see, when you start looking at early stage, they are dramatically reduced because a lot of those startups failed to make it, were not able to develop the technology fully. Or the team didn't work as well, and so on. And ultimately, when you get to the later stage, where a startup is well established, it has a product or products, well established market and customers, and so on. You see that number is even almost by order of magnitude is even sort of smaller, which again means as you grow, it becomes more challenging in achieving that sustainable path to growth. As the company moves through its stages, it becomes more challenging to achieve that sustainable pathway to growth. On the right-hand side, the graph now sort of correlates that the number of rounds with the use of IP, and it has and offers two examples: trademarks and patents. But you can look and also the both, and that's sort of the yellowish green. But you can look at the pattern, and you can see that it is a determining factor in getting to your later stage. And you can see that as you go, as a company or companies go through the various stages, the importance of that intellectual property, having it and using it, increases. So you see at the later stage, there are many more companies that have and use intellectual property rights as compared to when you're in the seed round. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us one of many things. It tells us that sometimes early startups don't put that attention in gaining and creating and securing intellectual property. Whereas when you are at the stage of your when you are at the late stage, the expectation is that you will have that valuable IP portfolio well embedded and ready to be used. So the takeaway message from this is the investment ecosystem can be very challenging, very competitive. It's very difficult to reach that sort of a late stage or the steady state of your sustainable growth. And finally, IP is a key driver when it comes to making sure you go through the various stages successfully. So now, so if we move to the next stage, shall I do that, Ronan? Or now that I'm okay. So takeaways. Too many to start with, to be honest. Our subject has been very broad. We offered a snapshot of what we think were the important things in actually getting your ideas and your companies and your startups and your corporate ideas off the ground and putting your team together and have the vision and so on. And it's all about the alignment of many different factors. When you try to, if you recall back on that sort of that arrow track, you saw the different components or the different blocks sort of put together. When you're trying to go from the left to right to your sustainable growth and ultimately exit, you need to have alignment between of the key factors, and that is your market assessment, again discussed in the previous webinars, your solution alignment, again discussed previously, business models, and today we talked a bit more about the team and how the team should be together, should come together, and how it should operate, and then the vision. You need to have the right team for the right technology, I think, as a sort of a brief takeaway, with the right skills and a mix of skills and roles to create the successful and effective team with a common vision. Everyone has to be pulling along the same direction. Otherwise, your spin out, your idea will surely fall flat. And ultimately, whichever way you look at it, you may have the best idea ever. You do need investment. This is the reality of the innovation ecosystem, that there is right next to it, there's a very large investment ecosystem, and these two things are connected. And your investment relies on the right go-to-market strategy and all of the above, market alignment, market assessment, solution alignment, so on, and only enabled by the right team. And that is a key outtake for our discussion today. And I think that concludes. Ronan, feel free to jump in and add. That concludes our discussion for today. So we have a few next steps here.
Kevin's going to take over.
Perhaps
for this one.
Kevin. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. No, that was really nice. It's all very complicated. I think the common thing we've had from all our presentations is basically mindset. And I do like how, it's not all about technology. We need the market side of things. The next steps of this was, as we say here, the last of our three. Each webinar is part of a module of what the training that we're putting together. These are all described in a deliverable that we've submitted, which I'm quite happy to provide to people. The next steps will be, okay, I'll send around a feedback form and ask you kindly to sort of provide some feedback, just, what you thought about it, what we could change, what you liked, what you didn't like. Of course, you liked everything, but, some feedback would be very valuable. Thank you. Colin and I, we're still working on the not still working, very soon, some material like templates representing, say, business plans or market analyses or whatever. These will allow you more within your own sector to start looking at, to study, to have a practice on how to actually, put into practice what we've been talking about in these webinars. We'll be making this available as well as a recording of this. And following that, those that have completed these documents and templates, get back to us and we'll arrange one-on-one sessions. And that's where, more detailed issues with regards to your sector can be discussed. We'll be doing a second cycle of webinars, templates, and one-on-one sessions, probably in about 6 months' time. Get this all sorted out, and we'll be making your feedback. As I mentioned, we'll be uploading it to the EU-CIP Knowledge Hub. We had a very nice discussion this morning from Joseph and his colleague Anastasia. It's still in progress, being developed, but Joseph is very keen in getting people to contact and get involved and so forth. So, and yeah, that's about it. Colin, have you any comments to make? No, obviously. Well, anybody got some? I open the floor now to any questions to our speakers. You guys just did too good a job.
Yeah, no comments from me. It's Jenny here. Just wanted to say how I thought I really enjoyed the session. I thought it was really interesting, really useful, and I look forward to staying in touch with you all on the sessions that are going to come. And yeah, so I'll keep an eye out and well, I'll fill in the feedback form when it comes around. But thanks very much. I found it really interesting.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, well, I think that's it for this afternoon. Once again, thank you very much, Ronan and Vassilios, and thank you to all of you for attending. And I'll pass on the feedback form. If you have any questions, please get in contact with Colin and I, and we'll get back to you and keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thank you. See you.